I get asked some pretty interesting questions when I tell people that I'm a sexologist. Some of the more PG ones I get asked are things like, does that mean you're like the mum from Sex Education? Does that mean you'll have sex with me? Or how on earth did you get into a field like that? People often assume that I've always been a really open, confident, sex-positive person. But the opposite is the truth. I tell them the story that I've told hundreds of times about how I always planned on being a high school drama teacher. I was going to study theatre and teaching up in big city in Perth and then move back to my country hometown, teach at the school that I went to, pop out a couple dozen kids, be a mum and live happily ever after. I tell them that that was the plan until I had a breakup and a friend of mine suggested that I study a class in sexology so that I could learn about communication and love languages and things about healthy relationships like how to have one. I tell them that this class blew my mind and it broke my heart at the same time. And when I learnt about my Catholic, regional, very privileged upbringing, my bubble wasn't just burst, it was utterly obliterated. And I just felt like I had to be a part of this field that made me a better person and the world a better place. A light had switched on in me. But there's a big part of this story that I choose to leave out, and it's because it's really hard to talk about your own shame. And that's the story about why my light was switched off in the first place. So my mum tells me stories about when I was a kid. I would write songs to God and I would sing them as I danced around the house. That when I'd play soccer, I would prance around the pitch, playing in the mud, occasionally participating in the game. And at family cricket matches at half-time, I would perform choreographed dances on the pitch for my family. Because when you grow up in a regional town, these are the places that are your stage. When I was in high school, I went to Catholic choir camp on the school holidays. I sang at church on Sundays. I learnt 4 types of dance, and I was in every school play that I could be in. Public speaking and performing weren't just a joy for me. They were my life. They were my passion. That was what I loved. Sadly now, they're one of my biggest fears. When I got into theatre at uni, my life was somewhat going to plan until along came Holly, one of my theatre teachers at uni. Her bullying started out as small microaggressions to begin with. She'd tease me for the way that I talked or laugh at the things I contributed to the class. And my friends used to check in on me after class and say, "You okay? She was pretty harsh on you." And I kind of shake it off and pretend like I was fine because we'd been told in the arts that you've got to be able to take criticism like a champ and have thick skin or you'll never make it. So I pretended I was fine. I do think that statement's bullshit now, to be honest with you. But at the time, I thought it was true, so I never said anything. And throughout a semester, this teacher utterly broke my spirit and my joy for performing. I wouldn't be able to sleep for weeks leading up to a performance. I'd do what I'm doing now, it's just shake as I'm speaking, and I'd have to go home and cry afterwards. In my last performance for her class, I was halfway through my piece and she stopped me and she said, You just don't have the urgency that this piece requires. And she sat back in her chair and shook her head as if to say, I can't believe I have to deal with this fucking amateur. And then she said, I want you to go outside the class and run around until you're extremely puffed and don't come back till you are. I looked at my friends in the crowd thinking, is she being serious? This is not something that happened. And in my moment of hesitation, she said, did you hear me? Hurry up. So I awkwardly walked outside the class and started to run. I had bare feet and it was drizzling with rain. And with every step that I took, the slit in my skirt got shorter and shorter as I got more and more mortified, and I could just feel the second-hand embarrassment dripping from my classmates as they just watched me run around in circles. And all I could think while I was running was, you're so fucking incompetent. What an embarrassment. How are you so shit at the one thing that you're meant to be really good at? When I got back to the class, I certainly had a sense of urgency because I'm also asthmatic. So I couldn't breathe very well and I rushed my piece because I wanted it to be over. I wanted that class to be over and I wanted to never perform again in my life. This is when I studied sexology. It was a class that was so welcoming, and it was such a safe space. It wasn't just anti-shame, but it was pro-inclusion. And even though I knew next to nothing about sex and relationships, my teacher Laurel, who's here tonight, she always made me feel really valued, and like I had something to say, and that I was important. And I hadn't felt that in a really long time. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to be the Laurel in other people's stories. My mum's really disappointed that I'm not in the arts anymore, which I give her kudos for flipping the script on parents being disappointed when their kids go into the arts. But she hides it really well. She often talks about me like I'm dead now. She says things like, oh, Jordina, she was such a wonderful performer. She was always so good on stage. And when I tell her about this teacher, Holly, in an attempt to explain my somewhat bizarre career shift to sexology, she tells me that she doesn't understand why this one teacher had such an ability to stop me doing the thing that I'd loved my whole life. And that makes me feel like a bit of a failure. But you see, it wasn't that one teacher. That moment brought back all the memories for me of my dance teacher of 13 years utterly screaming at me in front of everybody because I was talking. But I was in a class where everybody was talking. And of my high school maths teacher purposely pulling me out of the class just to tell me that he didn't understand how I got voted head girl because he doesn't see what anyone sees in me. Yeah, guess how I went in maths that year. And as I tell my mum these stories, she's reminded of another. She tells me that when I was in year 1 at a small regional school, I used to get really teary and upset every day before going to school. And when she'd ask me why, I'd tell her all the awful things that my teacher said to me in front of the class. How she'd laugh that I was really bad at spelling, or that I was stupid because I couldn't tell the time yet. My mum tells me that she felt really helpless when I was at that school, because she couldn't move me to a different class because there was only one, being a small regional school, and she couldn't move me to another school because there was only one. And when she tried to speak to the principal about it to make something happen, nothing ever did because my teacher was married to the principal. So I stayed in that teacher's class for year 1, 2, and 3. And every day I felt really fucking stupid. So you see, the dots started to connect for me. That it wasn't just this one teacher at uni that broke my spirit. It was a whole story of them doing that. And more so, it was a story of me truly believing that I was the problem and that I was worthless. Because shame is so powerful. So while this isn't a happy story about being fearless, I can tell you that me being up here tonight is just about the most terrifying thing that I can think of to do. And I'm pretty fucking fearful. And while my light was dimmed and dulled for a long, long time, I like to think it's coming back now. I see it like one of those trick party candles on a birthday cake that you blow out and just keeps coming back. And while I might not be on a stage performing like I always wanted to be, I'm sure as shit dedicated to making safe spaces where people feel included and valued for being exactly who they are in every single way. Because good teachers matter, and kind role models, they matter. Thank you.